Pokémon Stadium, a game that represents the core mechanic of Pokémon games. Pokémon Red and Green released in Japan in 1996 for the back then 7-year-old Game Boy. The transition from 8 bits to 16 bits seems like the natural way any game that first appeared in any 8-bit console such as the NES would take. Pokémon jumped from 8 bits to 32 bits within the core series games. However, back in 1998, Pokémon transitioned from 8 bits all the way up to 64 bits. Pokémon Stadium hit the shelves in the US in February 2000, and what a way for Pokémon to enter the new millennium in the Western market. All 151 Pokémon were at your disposal in all their 3D glory, ready to take on the hardest challenges anyone had seen back then, as it was the first time casual players got the chance to enter the competitive scene in the comfort of their home. But before we had access to what we know on this side of the world as Pokémon Stadium, Japan saw the release of this battle simulator 2 years before in the shape of the real Pokémon Stadium, a game known as Pokémon Stadium Zero for convenience. Pokémon Stadium Zero was conceived as a way to dive deep into the core mechanic of Pokémon games, Pokémon battles. Nonetheless, these challenges wouldn't happen against random characters, but against representations of real-life competitors that took part in a Pokémon tournament all the way back in 1997, known as Nintendo Cup 97. This meant that the game was not a walk in the park, a feature that has become infamous within the Pokémon Stadium series. While every single Pokémon had a 3D model in the game, not all of them were available for the player to use, as only those who held some competitive value had the chance to enter the stadium. Pokémon with little to no chance of winning were left out, and only visible via the 3D Pokédex. It goes without saying that the game felt incomplete, with only 40 Pokémon to choose from, but in an era where the N64 disk drive would grant games the chance to expand their content even further, it was planned to release for this short-lived expansion system, with all and probably more features than the ones present in the Pokémon Stadium we are familiar with. However, we all know the N64 DD's fate. It would have been a shame that everything developers worked on for Stadium Zero went to waste with the failure of the disk drive, so instead, they rescued the project when they gave birth to the Pokémon Stadium we all love and hate. Pokémon has been known for making use of several accessories in order to expand their game and playability outside the norm for other games, and we can see this in the shape of the Game Link cable, which not only did allow players to play against each other, but also to transfer bits of information in the shape of Pokémon, some of which weren't present in the other player's game. Pokémon Stadium introduced the Transfer Pack, an accessory attached to the N64 controller with a slot to transfer Pokémon from green, red, blue and yellow into the Stadium games, a piece of technology that was included in the bulky Pokémon Stadium cardboard box. In contrast to Donkey Kong 64, which included the expansion pack in order to even be able to play the game in the first place, you could play Pokémon Stadium without attaching the transfer pack to your controller, but the question is, would you want to? I wasn't given an option when my parents got me a second-hand copy of the game in the early 2000s. As you may guess, my chunky Pokémon Stadium box was a hollow container, as while the game and instruction booklet was there, the transfer pack was nowhere to be found. How different was Pokémon Stadium with the aid of the transfer pack and a copy of a Generation 1 game in contrast to the absence of it? To understand the difference, let's take a look at Pokémon themselves on the Game Boy games. This is Pikachu, a wild electric Pokémon at level 5. If you happen to catch another level 5 Pikachu, people might think that these two Pokémon are exactly the same, but this is not the case. It could be that Pikachu A is faster than Pikachu B, but Pikachu B could have a better defense, or it could be that Pikachu B is worse than Pikachu A in every single aspect. Now, when a trainer catches a Pokémon and battles against other wild or trained Pokémon, they will earn what we now know as effort values, points that trained Pokémon get to become stronger. As if trained Pokémon didn't have an advantage, you can also choose the moves and attacks that fit your Pokémon the best to face your opponents, even those that are at an advantage against yours. A water Pokémon is weak against an electric type, but if a Blastoise has access to Earthquake, it can turn the tables in a battle against Electabuzz, who is weak against ground Pokémon. Wild Pokémon, in contrast, only have access to the set of moves they naturally learn, and as expected, aren't as good as what a trainer might choose for them. I wanted to provide this example to understand the difference between playing Pokémon Stadium with and without a transfer pack. When you play Pokémon Stadium with a transfer pack, you're playing with trained Pokémon. When you play without it, you are playing with wild Pokémon. These wild Pokémon are in reality rental Pokémon, creatures the game provides for those unfortunate as myself who didn't have a transfer pack or a main series Pokémon game. I wanted to compare wild with rental Pokémon because if you choose a rental Alakazam against an opponent's Alakazam, the latter will always be better in basically every aspect imaginable, including their choice of moves and attacks. As a 10-year-old, a lack of a transfer pack would cost me dearly, as I was subject to what the game put at my disposal, and it wasn't good. First, we have unevolved Pokémon. For most competitions, they didn't stand a chance against your opponent. To balance things out, these weak creatures would have access to some of the best moves in the game, such as Flamethrower, Thunderbolt and Earthquake. Unfortunately, in the face of evolved Pokémon, it was once in a blue moon when this type of Pokémon could defeat an evolved opponent. The second type of Pokémon are those fully evolved, Pokémon at their peak, but with a fatal flaw: absolutely terrible movesets. Take for example Alakazam, one of the most powerful Pokémon in Generation 1. This psychic monster with access to moves such as Psychic would only get the lesser confusion as a rental Pokémon, a move almost half its power. With attack being one of its worst stats, choosing a physical move was ill-advised, but what's worse than that is a physical move that takes 2 turns to attack, such as Dig. Examples like this are common with fully evolved Pokémon, so if this powerful Pokémon weren't always the best to face the challenges Stadium had to offer, what else is there to do? Well, the third type of Pokémon is the mid-stage category, such as Kadabra. Counterintuitively, this is, for the most part, the kind of Pokémon you would want to use in conjunction with the fourth and fifth type of Pokémon, those being legendary Pokémon such as Articuno and Zapdos, and single-stage Pokémon such as Lapras and Jynx. The reason why you want to use this kind of Pokémon is due to their fairly decent movesets, the only weapon you have against the hardest challenge Pokémon Stadium has to offer. While not as good as the movesets given to unevolved Pokémon, they were the only good chance at winning. We have to understand that no matter how skilled the player is, victory is never guaranteed if a series of unfortunate events fall upon the most skilled of trainers. In combination with the infamous broken mechanics Generation 1 is known for, Pokémon Stadium was the ultimate challenge. Speed is a generally desired trait in any Pokémon game, aside from strategies that would appear in future Pokémon games that involve slow Pokémon moving first with the use of Trick Room. However, for the first generation, it was a universally desired element. Not only did you want your Pokémon to be fast in order to deliver the first blow, but also to increase the chances of landing critical hits, an occurrence that doubles the damage an attack would normally do. The chance of this happening nowadays has a 6.25% of occurring, but back then, the percentage increased the faster your Pokémon was, reaching a percentage as high as 27%, basically making 1 in 4 hits critical when used by the fastest Pokémon in the game. On top of that, attacks such as Slash that inherently had an increased critical hit chance, landing double the damage was virtually guaranteed. If you speak about Gen 1 Pokémon mechanics and you didn't speak about the special stat, you didn't talk about Pokémon mechanics. A Pokémon has 2 types of attack and defense stats, the physical and the special. A physical attack is generally that in which a Pokémon uses a part of its body to inflict damage. If the opponent wants to resist as best as possible that kind of attacks, a high defense is recommended. On the other hand, a special attack is that in which the user launches beams of electricity, psychic moves, fire, or whatever doesn't imply the user touching the opponent, and because of that, a high special defense will reduce the damage. While this has always been the case for attack and defense, in Gen 1, special attack and special defense were packed into the special stat, giving an almost unfair advantage to Pokémon with high special. Dark Pokémon, a type that was introduced in Generation 2, exists for the sole purpose of putting a stop to Psychic Pokémon, the most powerful type in the first games. Pokémon such as Exeggutor, Starmie, Alakazam, Mewtwo and Mew are 5 of the top 10 competitive Pokémon in Red, Blue and Yellow. This very type took advantage of the special stat. Pokémon Stadium had 4 facilities for battling. Free Battle, a place where you can fight against friends or the CPU, Stadium, the main feature with different cups and divisions to show your skills as a Pokémon trainer, and the Gym Leader Castle, a place that represents your path across the Kanto gyms, the Elite Four and the Champion. The stadium has 4 cups. The Petite Cup for unevolved Pokémon between level 25 and 30, no taller than 6 feet 7 and no heavier than 20 kilograms, limiting the selection to 45. The sum of the levels of the 3 Pokémon chosen for battle cannot be more than 80. The Poké Cup is a competition for Pokémon between level 50 and 55. The sum of the levels of the 3 Pokémon chosen for battle cannot exceed 155. The only Pokémon unavailable for this cup are Mewtwo and Mew, and this is one of the 2 cups that have 4 divisions: Pokéball, Great Ball, Ultra Ball, and Master Ball. You can expect unevolved Pokémon in the Pokéball division for an easy challenge, and very challenging and powerful ones in Master Ball. The Prime Cup allows every single Pokémon to participate without level restriction, although it's better to bring your most powerful Pokémon, as all opponents will be at level 100. Same as Poké Cup, it has the same 4 divisions. In the Pika Cup, Pokémon between level 15 and 20 could participate with no restrictions other than the level this Pokémon can be caught at. The sum of the levels of the 3 Pokémon chosen for battle cannot be more than 50. This cup is quite interesting, as technically Pokémon such as Charizard and Articuno could be used, but since it's impossible to find them under level 20, you can't select them without the use of cheating devices. I want to stop to talk about my experience with this cup. You might think that a tournament with such low levels, if not a walk in the park, wouldn't be as challenging as facing level 100 Pokémon in the Prime Cup. But for those who experienced this challenge, you already know what I'm gonna talk about. With you, the Fisherman. A trainer class present in many Pokémon games and whose team includes Magikarp and Tentacool. Don't be fooled, as in this competition, the Fisherman is arguably one of the most difficult trainers, not only in Pokémon Stadium, but in the history of the franchise up to this day. His team is composed of Tentacool, Raticate, Golduck, Clefable, Slowbro, and Dragonair. None of these Pokémon sound like a threat, except for Slowbro being a psychic Pokémon. Don't get me wrong, it is, but let me tell you about the real threat here. His Dragonair's moveset consists of Dragon Rage, Thunder Wave, Double Team, and Wrap. If you didn't have a transfer pack as it was my case, you were out of luck, as this dragon would be at level 18 while all your Pokémon at level 15. And I've already emphasized how awful rental Pokémon are. First of all, Dragonair will most likely move first, given the level difference and use of Thunder Wave to assure your Pokémon will have trouble moving. And using electric Pokémon wouldn't save you, as they also got paralyzed in Generation 1. It's quite possible that Dragonair goes for Double Team, to decrease your chances of connecting an attack even further. Once done, this Pokémon might choose to use Wrap, a move that doesn't allow you to move at all for 2 to 5 turns if it hits, and also Dragon Rage, a fixed damage move that will subtract 40 HP from your Pokémon. Dragon Rage might not seem like a threat, but let's not forget that we're talking about Pokémon between level 15 and 20, Pokémon that are slightly above 40 HP at full health. What this means is that Dragonair has a 100 accuracy 2-hit KO move, and if your Pokémon is slower, it will only get the chance to attack once, if given attack connects at all. Dragons were only weak against Ice types, theoretically against Dragon types too, but this didn't really happen, as no other move besides the fixed damage Dragon Rage attack existed in the Red, Blue, and Yellow era. When you win a battle without losing any of your Pokémon during these tournaments, you would be granted a continue, meaning that if none of your Pokémon were defeated until you made it to the Fisherman, you would have 7 continues. Here's a video by Nintendo Movies where the player uses a Gyarados, a Dratini, and a Gengar against the Fisherman Slowbro, Clefable, and the infamous Dragonair. Notice how the player's Gyarados that is at level 20 relies in the move Bite, an attack that has a 10% of flinching the opponent. Slowbro keeps using Psychic until Gyarados is at 42 HP. Then, Gyarados lands the coveted flinch and takes advantage of this to finish off Slowbro. Then comes Clefable, a Pokémon with Thunderbolt that could one-shot the water-flying opponent. With that in mind, the trainer switches to Dratini to resist the electric attack and do some damage, as Gyarados is virtually the only hope to claim victory. Dratini is easily defeated by the now fairy Pokemon. Now it's turn for Gengar, whose move pool was awful back then, as no ghost type moves other than the 20 power lick existed. The user relies on the use of Metronome due to the issue I just told you about, and despite the randomness of the move, Gengar does use decent moves while Clefable is suffering from the paralysis the previous Pokemon inflicted on it. Finally, Gengar lands a critical hit, knocking out Clefable, and now we know who's next. The Fisherman sends out the level 18 Dragonair, and since its opponent had only 36 HP, Dragon Rage becomes a one-hit KO for the ghost Pokemon. Now it's turn for the trainer's final Pokemon, Gyarados. The fact that this Pokemon remains with over 40 HP is one of the two key elements for the final result of the match. Gyarados starts by using Bite and flinches the opponent. In the second turn, Gyarados uses Bite once again, this time without flinching Dragonair, giving it the chance to use its most broken move, which also leaves the water Pokemon with 2 HP. Gyarados attacks one last time to deplete Dragonair's last 4 HP, leading the trainer to victory. This battle didn't only involve the fact that the trainer was using the advantage of having a fast powerful level 20 Pokemon, but also the luck factor that is flinching the opponent with Bite. The other key factor was that Slowbro was also flinched, leaving Gyarados with 42 HP that would allow it to resist Dragon Rage. Just taking into account the battle between Gyarados and Dragonair, it had a 10% chance of winning the battle thanks to that Bite that didn't allow its opponent to move. If Dragonair had been able to move, this video wouldn't exist. Now, consider the fact that the player had access to a transfer pack since, as I said before, no rental Pokemon besides level 15 are available for this cup. That's what I had to go through, and I don't want to say it's impossible to beat this cup with only rental Pokemon because I eventually did. However, the fact that luck plays such an elemental role even with strong Pokemon leaves no room for doubt about why the Pika Cup is the hardest challenge in Pokémon Stadium, and arguably in the whole franchise. And don't even get me started with round 2, as this level 18 Dragonair becomes a level 20 nightmare. After having completed the stadium and the gym leader castle, the player gets the chance to face the boss of the game, Mewtwo. I've already spoken about how the Psychic type became the most dominant type in Generation 1, but Mewtwo goes beyond being just a Psychic type abomination. This genetic monster was tied second for the fastest Pokemon of all, just behind Electrode, with attacks such as Psychic, Thunderbolt to paralyze the opponent with a strong accurate electric attack, Blizzard, a 110 power Ice type move with a 1 in 10 chance of freezing the opponent, and an accuracy of 90% that had to be reduced to 70 in future generations for balancing purposes, and Rest, a move that will replenish its whole HP and heal any status ailments that most probably took the player 5 or 6 turns to inflict. While there are exploits to defeat Mewtwo by using Thunder Wave to reduce its speed and a one-hit KO move such as Fissure, Mewtwo is the perfect example of what the most powerful Pokemon in existence is all about. And yes, Mega Rayquaza and Zacian are a thing in more modern Pokemon games, but within the context of Generation 1, I don't think that any Pokemon has ever come close to measuring up to the clone of the mythical Pokemon Mew. With Mewtwo defeated, it's time for round 2, a mode that challenges the player to battle through the game all over again, against the same trainers but with different Pokemon and a much higher difficulty. So far, we've spoken about all battle facilities. Now, let's explore the other features that Pokémon Stadium has to offer. The GB Tower acts as an inbuilt Super Game Boy exclusive for Pokémon Red, Blue, Yellow and even Green. While playing the games on a big screen was quite convenient, considering how bad the Game Boy family screens were, another advantage was that you could play at double the speed with the Doduo GB Tower if you beat the Poké Cup challenge in its Master Division, and at triple the speed with the Dodrio Tower by beating the Master Ball Division of the Prime Cup. This was a huge advantage if we compare the inherent speed of Generation 1 games. Those blessed with the transfer pack were able to quickly train their Pokemon to their desired levels, to try new Pokemon or entire teams to beat specific challenges. With the discovery of the missing no glitch and unlimited access to rare candies, vitamins, Master Balls and the Mew glitch, the sky was the limit for anyone who wanted to 100% beat Pokémon Stadium. But even completing round 2 didn't mean beating the game 100%. That's because the Hall of Fame, another facility in Pokémon Stadium, holds the key for completing the game 100%. In the same fashion as the core series games, the Hall of Fame holds a spot for every single Pokémon that has achieved an important feat, such as beating the Elite Four or any of the cups in the highest division. Of course, by the end of the game, you'll have several Pokémon taking the place they deserve, but what about the rest? With such a difficult game, how can anyone expect to see a statue of Caterpie or Magikarp among legends such as Mewtwo and Articuno? Well, Game Freak was expecting people to achieve this, because there's a prize for those brave enough who dare to achieve this unfathomable goal. Considering the difficulty and time this would imply, you could only expect this prize to come in the shape of the mythical Pokémon Mew, in the same way I expected this Pokémon to be in my possession after completing the Pokédex in red, blue and yellow, instead of the certificate I end up getting. Pokémon Stadium disappointed us once more, as the ultimate prize of the game is a Psyduck. But what's special about this Psyduck? This Pokémon has access to Amnesia, a move that increases your special 2 stages, meaning that nowadays it would be the equivalent of using 2 Calm Minds in a single turn. While Amnesia is a fantastic move, I don't think it's worth going through the effort of completing Pokémon Stadium. I consider other prize Pokémon more valuable, such as those that can only be chosen once in the adventure, such as Eevee or the Fossils, or the Surfing Pikachu. If you wanted to transfer your prize Pokémon, then you'll have to visit the Pokémon Lab, a place that served as a storage system and a transfer center between games. Not too much to say about it. Finally, after all the stress and psychological scars left by Pokémon battles, you could visit the final facility, Kids Club, where you could choose from 9 different minigames to play against the CPU or your friends. Magikarp Splash consists in hitting a counter as many times as possible. In Clefairy Says, your memory will be put to the test, as you need to pay attention to what the Clefairy teacher is instructing you to do. Run Rattata Run is a minigame where you press a button to make your Pokémon run as fast as possible, while avoiding obstacles that will slow you down. Snore War has Drowsy trying to make the opponents fall asleep by casting Hypnosis through a pendulum you need to hit at the right time. In Thundering Dynamo, you're a Pikachu or a Voltorb trying to electrocute the others by pressing A or B as fast as possible, depending on what the screen shows to fill an energy bar. We can play as Lickitung in a sushi restaurant trying to eat the most expensive Japanese dishes in Sushi Go Round. Ekans Hoop Hurl has Ekans scoring points by throwing themselves at Diglett. In Rock Harden, Metapod and Kakuna will show the world who has the hardest cocoon, tested by falling boulders. And finally, in Dig Dig Dig, you're a Sandshrew trying to find water. Aside from the major observations I've made about Pokémon Stadium, there are other minor elements that have given people something to talk about to this day. Ted Lewis is an American voice actor, best known as the voices of King Dedede, Ryo Bakura from Yu-Gi-Oh!, but also for being the announcer of Pokémon Stadium 1 and 2.
How's that? A powerful hit! The type disadvantage had no effect! Oh, it was casually cast aside!
In contrast to battles in red, blue and yellow, the action in the stadium felt vibrant thanks to Ted's amazing delivery. However, I think he did an even better job in Pokémon Stadium 2. Who doesn't remember when a one-hit KO connected?
Oh, what's this? Oh, that hit just the right spot! Grand slam! That was brutal!
Talking about the sound department, something I cannot forgive Game Freak for to this day is the fact that they completely dismissed the Pokémon cries they used in Stadium 1 and 2. Due to the system's limitations, their Game Boy counterparts sound very artificial, very 8-bitty for a good reason. In Pokémon Stadium 1 and 2, each Pokémon was given a distinct cry that held their Game Boy personality, and at the same time sounded in a way that you could imagine Pokémon being real-life creatures in their natural habitats. By the way, if you enjoy my videos, please subscribe to the EisenBerg Experience. I posted the Street Fighter 2 Iceberg, and it's one of the most complete videos on the matter out there. Thank you so much. I remember when I got Pokémon Colosseum for my birthday and how excited I was to listen to the announcer and the new Pokémon cries for the next generation, only to realize that both were completely absent. I thought it was a sin not to have the Pokémon Stadium cries plus the new ones from Generation 3 Pokémon. While from Generation 6 onward they updated the cries to sound more according to modern generations, Pokémon Stadium cries were the way to go, but Game Freak decided not to use them ever again. Don't get me wrong, I don't think all cries sound perfectly. Pidgeotto sounds like a turkey, and Graveler out of all Pokémon sounds like a distressed elephant. In the visual department, there's something worth noticing. The vast majority of Pokémon have nicknames. This doesn't have any effect at all in other games outside the Stadium series, but in Stadium 1 and 2, whenever a Pokémon has a nickname, it combines it with the original trainer's ID number to generate a specific hue of the Pokémon's original color. This is probably one of the closest examples of what shiny Pokémon would look like before shiny Pokémon existed, at least officially, as thanks to the Space World 97 prototype of Pokémon Gold, we could see that shiny Pokémon were already planned to appear 1 year before the release of Stadium 1, so it's quite possible that this was Game Freak's attempt at experimenting with alternate colors for Pokémon. A user by the name of Eric Finnan wrote a 14-page document talking about this poorly understood mechanic, and trust me, it is way more complex than I thought. But he links, among other useful things, a gallery for all the hues available for all 251 3D Pokémon models. And what about Pokémon animations? There's a debate among fans on how Game Freak doesn't seem to care too much about the animations performed by Pokémon anymore. Pokémon Stadium and Battle Revolution have been used as examples of how quality has dropped. However, some people have defended the fact that Pokémon Stadium is a battle simulator, with way less elements to take into account if we compare it to RPG adventure games like Pokémon Scarlet and Violet, with 1025 Pokémon and way more complex mechanics that would leave little space to add to the vivid animations from Pokémon Stadium. But where's the Pokémon Stadium series after 24 years since its release? Does it hold any relevance? I think it does. Nintendo decided to re-release Pokémon Stadium 1 and 2 for the Nintendo Switch Online expansion pack, but with a fatal flaw: the impossibility of transferring your Pokémon. And what a terrible mistake by Game Freak not to include one of the main and most attractive features. Seeing the Pokémon you went on an adventure with in 3D and conquer hard challenges was really exciting. And I understand that there's no way to put a cartridge older than a quarter century on a Nintendo Switch to transfer your old Pokémon, probably erased by the depleted battery of your game, but don't tell me you couldn't have connected Pokémon Home with it. In fact, I would have given players the option to buy Pokémon Stadium 1 and 2 bundles with any of the core series games to be able to play them on the GB Tower. That would have worked wonders, even if it had been at a higher price, but apparently the only way to experience the real Stadium series is to find a way to get a Nintendo 64, a transfer pack, and a Game Boy Pokémon game. What else is there for me to say about Pokémon Stadium? That is one of the most beloved spin-off Pokémon games, that I have core memories with my parents, brother, cousin and friends, and that without it, this channel might have never existed in the first place. If you haven't played Generation 1 and Red, Blue and Yellow don't convince you, you might want to give the Stadium series a try in order to understand how Pokémon played back then, and understand the long path that the franchise has gone to perfect its gameplay and mechanics. This has been EisenBerg. Thank you so much for watching.